Welcome back to the MAGA Arizona Agenda 2027 podcast, brought to you by Kevin Stankiewicz. Today we're going to discuss the issue of housing and affordability. Today we're going to talk about housing affordability, the causes of why housing has become unaffordable for young Americans, and the solutions that would make it affordable for young Americans again. To understand the scale of the problem for young adults today, consider that the median sales price of a home was only 3.5 times the median household income back in 1985. But in today, the sale price of a new home is 5.8 times the average family income. The number of 30-year-olds who are both married and owning a home has dropped from 50% in 1970, went down to a little bit to 45% in 1990, but then dropped dramatically down to 15% in 2020, and it's likely still dropping. The median age of a home buyer has risen from 31 in 1981 to 47 in 2019. The median age of a first-time home buyer has risen from 31 in 2002 to 38 in 2024. So one of the first causes of our housing shortage and high cost is increased demand through mass immigration, illegal immigration, legal immigration, permanent and temporary visa holders. This increase in demand pushes up prices and reduces the supply available to Americans. Another contributing cause is American homes bought by foreigners who don't even permanently live here. For example, a lot of homes in the Phoenix area are owned by Canadians who use the Phoenix area as a winter retreat from Canadian winters. One of the bigger problems that a lot of people are aware of is large institutional investors are buying up massive numbers of homes to turn them into rentals, like Blackstone, converting owner-occupied housing into rental housing. Another reason why new homes cost more than they used to is over-regulation of new home construction, both in building codes and zoning. Building codes often include a lot of extras that, for environmental purposes that make new homes more expensive than they used to be. But I think even a worse factor is zoning that prohibits land development into housing in a lot of places. The open space regulations that just limit land supply, therefore increasing land cost, which therefore increases housing cost. A regional problem is that in the eastern US, only 4% of land is owned by the government. But in the western US, over half of the land is owned by the federal or state government. It varies from 89% federal and state ownership in Alaska, 81% in Nevada, 70% in Utah, and 54% in Arizona. A lot of former military bases were supposed to be redeveloped when closed. Unfortunately, a lot of them have been preserved for industrial or open space rather than housing. This is a critical problem in certain areas like the San Francisco Bay Area that has an extreme housing shortage, but these former military bases are still just empty lots. One of the problems is that currently, according to equations and laws, federal funds are allocated to state and local governments based on historical populations, i.e. the last census, which could be 9 years old. And the problem with this is it tends to reward cities that are shrinking and penalize cities that are growing. Cities that are shrinking and don't have as much infrastructure needs continue to get funding for the population they used to have, even though they don't have as many anymore. Whereas cities that are rapidly growing and need additional infrastructure funds don't get them because their populations used to be smaller. Another big problem for Western states is that there's not enough water available for new housing construction. There's actually plenty of water, but a lot of water is used to grow cheap agricultural products like alfalfa, which is cattle feed. And a lot of that is actually exported to countries in Asia, maybe even China. Instead of using water for a high value use, like making it possible to build housing for young American citizen families, we're instead subsidizing its use to grow cheap export crops to foreign countries. Another problem is that there's a lack of building materials, which pushes up prices, which also pushes up the price of construction. This is often due to restricted logging rules, constricted mining rules, and other resource extraction. Another shortage is skilled workers, both engineers and skilled tradesmen. Too much money is being spent on universities for useless degrees, and not enough is spent on STEM degrees, especially engineering, and skilled trades, especially the construction fields. Quick solutions include: 1, deporting all illegal aliens and decreasing legal immigration, especially temporary visas, to reduce the population and the demand for housing, freeing up housing for Americans. 2, taxing foreign homeowners who don't work here, who just have it as a vacation home or a seasonal home, to encourage them to sell that home to an American. It might be a small tax at first, but go up incrementally so they have time to sell it. The third quick solution is to have a gradual increasing property tax on large institutional homeowners like Blackstone. It would go up gradually each year and be higher depending on the number of homes. Large homeowners would have higher taxes than small ones, to encourage these large homeowners to, in an orderly way, gradually sell off their properties to put them back on the market and make them available again for young families of American citizens to buy their home. We need to cut regulations on home builders so they can build homes quicker and cheaper. This can be done 2 ways. First, cut federal regulations, unnecessary, excessive federal regulations, to make it easier for home builders everywhere to build homes. But another trick we could play is that if we're selling off federal land to home builders, we have them build the homes on federal land first so that they're exempt from state and local regulations. To open up more land for developers, a small amount of excessive federal land, not critical national park land or monuments, most likely some excess BLM land or national forest fringe land, can be sold in small amounts to home builders to build new homes for American citizens. Senator Mike Lee from Utah has already proposed a bill to do this. There were some criticisms, so I believe he's currently revising it, and it could be proposed again. We should also require land that was turned over from the military to local governments to be redeveloped, to actually be redeveloped quickly for housing and not stuck forever in development regulatory processes or preserved for only industrial, commercial, or even worse, just open space. Another thing is we should change the federal funding allocation for infrastructure funds to local governments and states by switching it from the last census to current or recent new home construction. We should incentivize cities that build new housing by giving them more money for infrastructure they need to facilitate that new housing, and give less to cities that are allowing themselves to shrink. I also think we need to reallocate water resources in the Western US from growing cheap agricultural products that are exported to foreign countries and reallocate that water to domestic use, especially new home construction. We also need to cut regulations on things like logging and mining and other resource extraction needed to produce the building materials we need to build affordable homes. To produce the workforce capable of building the housing we need to reallocate federal funds, scholarships, student loans, and other things, away from woke majors like DEI majors or ethnic studies and things like that are useless like that, and instead redirect federal money to subsidize education for STEM majors, especially engineering, and skilled trade schools or apprenticeships, especially in the construction trades. I have proposed these solutions based on my 26 years in the engineering business, designing infrastructure and new large housing developments, based on what I see as the problems and what are the potential solutions. And I think getting at these root problems and fixing them is a far better solution than other proposed ideas like 50-year mortgages. Thank you for watching the MAGA Arizona Agenda 2027 podcast on the subject of making housing affordable again. Please like and subscribe to see future videos on other topics. Thank you.